All right, we've got oh, there you are. For a minute, I had a picture of Steve Mnuchin there, and I thought you have turned into a strange pasty-faced zombie. I don't know what. So here's the thing. I wanted to ask you about this because conservatives do have a tendency to get a little in their they get a little in their own space. They're talking to themselves, and they start to think there are conspiracies. Someone pointed out to me the other day that if you Google the image for white couples, you get mixed race couples. You get a white person and a black person together. Whereas if you Google Asian couples, you get Asian people. But it's very possible that that happens because it will also turn up the same thing for black and white couples. So in other words, the algorithm hears black and white couples and just gives you the last two words, white couples. So it's possible that's actually not intentional. So I wanted you to look into whether or not we are being censored on social media. What did you find?
Well, I'll tell you what couldn't be coincidental is that when you search for conservative news on Google, you get mixed search results. You get some real news and you get some fake news too.
Yeah.
So just on this one point, if you search for the Daily Wire, say, you will immediately get left-wing so-called fact-checking websites, which aren't they're just opinion columns, but they call them fact-checking now because we've gone fully Orwellian. Yeah. And when you search for conservatives, you'll get those left-wing opinion columns, but when you search for left-wing news and left-wing outlets, you don't. You get the left-wing outlet. No. If you search for Huffington Post, you get the Huffington Post. If you search for the Daily Wire, you get PolitiFact or some of the other left-wing fact checkers.
Right, because they are left-wing.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that is no coincidence. That was a particular decision by Google. I will say, though, sometimes we go too far. It's easy to say all of social media are stacked against us. All of these tech giants are trying to kill us. We should be precise in what we're saying, because that isn't quite right. The situation is terrible, but that isn't quite right. There was this excellent piece in Wired magazine that came out a few days ago, and it's on Facebook's evolution and how they got to this new algorithm, which is killing publishers. It is one of the first instances of journalism I've seen in a very long time.
Surprisingly. I saw this piece. It was great. Yeah.
It was a very good piece, and it traces that evolution. What we can see from Facebook is that they're killing all publishers, but not just conservatives, even though conservatives bear the brunt of it. What I mean by that is Facebook has an open platform for a while. When it was first started, it was basically an open platform. In an effort to kill Twitter, Facebook decided to start serving more news in its news feed. That's when you got fewer cat pictures and fewer pictures of your nephew or whatever, and you started getting news. Then all hell broke loose when a contract employee of Facebook took some screenshots of emails that went out to the team. I will assure you, at Facebook offices, there's a lot of left-wing propaganda on the walls. You'll see things all about how important it is to say Black Lives Matter, how it's awful to say that all lives matter, a lot of, rainbow flags and transgenderism's great, and, it is fully left-wing in that environment. So this contract employee starts taking a couple screenshots. He leaks them to Gizmodo, not thinking that, maybe the largest tech giant on the face of the earth can find your G-chats. So they call him up. They say, hey, did you leak to Gizmodo? He says, what? Who's Gizmodo? Gizmodo who? And he says, we have all of your information, dum-dum. We're Facebook. So they fire him. And now, all of a sudden, this starts to leak. So Gizmodo runs a piece on this. There's a lot of information now that Facebook is selecting news stories in trending news. This came up in 2016. It's selecting news stories for to benefit Hillary Clinton, to benefit the left wing, to hurt conservatives. All of this leaks, so Zuckerberg freaks out. He invites a ton of conservatives to a meeting at Facebook. So you remember that big meeting with Glenn Beck was there?
Yeah. Glenn was very impressed.
But he was very impressed, that's true. And but Facebook, because they're pretty crafty, they invited a bunch of conservatives intentionally who would all fight with each other. As conservatives, if you get two conservatives in a room, they're going to fight with each other.
Exactly, yeah.
So they do this. Nothing really comes of that meeting, as you recall. Glenn Beck was impressed with him. Other people said it was a farce. Nothing happened. They continued to select against conservatives. Then Rupert Murdoch, head of News Corporation, threatened Zuckerberg and said publishers weren't making enough money. All the meanwhile, publishers are slowly putting all of their ad revenue through Facebook. Facebook created a mechanism called Instant Articles, whereby they started hosting all of the ad revenue for these publishers. So now they've got them on the hook. all of a sudden, Facebook doesn't want to be seen as anti-conservative, so they hire some journalists to clean it up. Of course, they hire Snopes. Of course, they hire CNN employees.
I mean, do they not? This is the thing that kills me. I mean, Jill Abramson, we were talking about the fact that she's walking around with a Barack Obama doll in her purse, but she thinks the New York Times is a straight arrow publication. I mean, do they not know?
In fairness, I walk around with a Barack Obama doll. It's a little voodoo doll that I start poking.
I said that, yeah. I beat you to that joke.
Did you? Damn. Too bad. Great minds think alike.
Great minds think alike, yeah.
So,
but I mean, do they not know that the Snopes is a left-wing site?
It is hard for me to imagine that they don't know, but it is a bubble. I mean,
yes,
clearly, I know that Mark Zuckerberg reads the news because all the news goes through his website, but it is quite a bubble. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg is prey to that as well. They certainly don't have any respect for right-wing views.
Right.
We know, I'm having Austin Peterson on the show. He's a candidate for Senate in Missouri. He's a libertarian. He gave a gun away as part of a fundraiser on his Facebook page, and Facebook shut him down.
That was on Facebook, shut him down?
Yeah, and we know that the COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, has donated the maximum amount to the Democrat incumbent in that Senate race.
Wow.
So that we know that what the political atmosphere is like there. That said, these algorithm changes, I think, are not intentionally aimed at conservatives. I think they just take them out for a couple reasons. One, the Russians, through that media group, spent about $100,000 on the election to buy Facebook ads to cause some chaos. That is not a lot of money. There were reports that they spent millions. Didn't happen. They spent $100,000. Media companies spend that in a second. I mean, that is not a lot. We know that some organic websites, for instance, right-wing news, was able to reach just as many people as the Russians did in a year. They reached them in a week. Now Facebook is clamping down, shutting down all of these things, and only referring to trustworthy news sources. This is the way that they're killing conservatives, is that Facebook created the new media. The old traditional media had a monopoly on news for 50 years and over 50 years in this country. New media broke through, all of a sudden conservatives have a voice. Facebook allowed that to happen. Now Facebook is killing it, again to privilege the New York Times and those traditional sources.
So in other words, when you privilege the traditional sources, which used to be center-left, during the kind of great consensus in the 50s and 60s. When you privilege those, you're now privileging sources that no longer are, because that is the whole thing about leftism. It eats things out from the inside, but continues to portray them as if they were the same place. So the New York Times continues to pretend to be a center-left thing, but it's actually now a leftist newspaper, which it is. It's just a totally, I mean, if you read the headlines today, it was hilarious what they were reporting on, and even telling you, they were telling you that Trump was going to fail in North Korea, that the Iran deal was very important to you. You know, it's just total leftism. So when you privilege mainstream media, you're privileging the left.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so in this way, depending on how you look at it, Facebook is either fairer because some left-wing fringy companies have also gone out of business. So they're, you know, the left-wing kind of new media companies and the right-wing new media companies are getting hurt almost, not really equally, but there's a little more fairness. But you might say it's more insidious because by reverting to that old system, you are privileging the New York Times, the most ridiculous clickbaity left-wing website on the internet. Other tech companies are less crafty about it. They are just targeting conservatives. Twitter admitted to targeting conservatives. They admitted on video to James O'Keefe that they're shadow banning conservatives. So conservatives are not just banned. They don't even know that they've been banned. They just find that people are interacting less with their profiles. We know that YouTube is explicitly censoring conservatives. They censored Prager famously on, here are just a few videos that YouTube has demonetized from Dennis Prager. Why America Must Lead. Why did America fight the Korean War? You know, that controversial, that very controversial 70-year-old war.
Just pure racism. That's
pure racism. The world's most persecuted minority Christians who are being slaughtered in the Middle East. And this is one they felt was just not, it was just not safe. It's just too extreme. The 10 Commandments, do not murder.
So wait, so they're not taking them down. They're just making it impossible for them to make money, to earn a living, basically.
Not just that. They are making it impossible for them to earn a living, to try to drive them out of business. They're also restricting where they can be seen. So Prager University, which does 5-minute videos that on pretty normal topics like the Korean War and the 10 Commandments, now cannot be viewed from high schools or universities on certain videos. So that is pretty brutal censorship. And then obviously, the left wing is not being demonetized. So John Oliver, who is a foreigner interfering in our elections and in our politics.
Those Brits, they always want to get us back.
They've been doing it for centuries. His videos where he rants about conservatives constantly, those haven't been demonetized. Plus, YouTube partnered with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which calls anybody to the right of Hillary Clinton
they're a hate
terrorist.
Group.
They are. The SPLC is a hate group.
A hate group. Yeah, no, there's no question about it. So, is there anything conservatives can do to fight back?
I wish I had some better news for you. You know, frankly, these people have a monopoly on information. And I'm not suggesting that we can break them up as a monopoly, because you'd have to show harm to the consumer. You'd have to show who the consumer really is. There is going to be a lot of legal work that has to happen to figure out how to deal with these new media companies. They're so disruptive. The one thing we can do, though, and the one place where they should be regulated, is that Facebook is the largest publisher in the history of the world. The reason that Facebook has tried so desperately to both not target conservatives explicitly and certainly not to appear that they're targeting conservatives is that they want to remain a technology company and not a publisher. Doesn't matter. They are the largest publisher in the history of the world, and they're not regulated at all as a publisher. That has to change. That's one way to fight back. You can try to start your own Twitter. You can try to start your own YouTube. There will be a ghettoizing effect, because the whole way these networks work is that everybody's there. Right. That's all of their value. Is that going to work for conservatives? There's a company called Gabby that has tried to become the conservative Twitter. Hasn't really worked thus far. I think probably the stronger way to do this is not to try to target these people with regulation, but to apply regulations fairly, or even close to fairly, to these major companies, and you might see a leveling out and a decrease in the capriciousness that is going on at Facebook and YouTube.
That's really interesting, and your argument about the mainstream trusting in the mainstream media because they've been around for a long time. It really is basically like it's 1770 and the broadsides are going back and forth, and we'll only trust stuff that comes from the Crown, because
that's right.
You can always trust the Crown. Yeah.
For my money, this is really the most insidious strategy.
Yeah.
If Twitter and Google were smarter, they would be taking this up, because it's so defensible for people to say, well, they're just going to the trusted news sources, and they're able to achieve exactly the same result much more effectively.
Michael Knowles, The Michael Knowles Show, coming up with Austin, who is
coming up? Austin Peterson, Libertarian candidate for president, and now a Republican candidate in Missouri. And we're going to talk about exactly this problem, his experience of it, and what he thinks of 2018 elections.
Cool. Really interesting, Knowles. Thanks a lot.